This video is sponsored by DJ The Lazy Gamer and Crimson Manifesto. Hey everyone, and welcome to the final part of the 3-part Naruto miniseries, What If Naruto Was Not About Ninja? Like last time, I'm not going to spend a lot of preamble getting you kind of caught up with what the series is supposed to be about and what I'm going to be doing in this part. All of those things are kind of detailed in the first 2 parts, especially a lot of the setup for this one, because I just want to jump right in. My inspirations, however, are the Shenmue series, the Yakuza series, Mission Yozakura family, Spy X family, or Spy by family as I call it, and most of all, Sakamoto Days. Sakamoto Days is so amazing that it truly inspired this entire miniseries. I had the idea in my head to do one of these set in modern time, kind of taking the route of what Sakamoto Days does, which is it's a bunch of hitmen who are supposed to be stealthy and covert and not kind of easy to notice, doing all these superhuman feats like building level destruction and some of the best choreography in Jump right now. So above your duties of making sure you leave a like on this video and commenting your thoughts and all that other YouTube stuff, you're going to want to make sure that at some point you either pick up the Sakamoto Days manga, or when it inevitably gets an anime, make sure you're watching that, because I promise you it's gonna be dope. Now, as I said at the end of the samurai part, the lore and backstory of our premise here is very much the same and or just really simple. Our change being that we will just be inserting a bunch of generations between that of Ashura and Indra and their first reincarnations. Or they can just be a bunch of names in between now, and then we just don't really get time to explore if you prefer that explanation. This means ninjutsu and therefore ninjutsu warfare are conceived, but from there not really expanded upon very well, as unlike in canon, the age of Hashirama and Madara comes a good few generations later. By the time they do, however, a large amount of the shinobi arts have already begun to be lost to time, with a very select few capable of molding their chakra able to do more than enhance themselves for superhuman abilities. And this is why it is so important to write down, record, and pass down traditions and historical things that you actually want to preserve. Also, just as an aesthetic difference of this world, the tail beasts don't necessarily emerge as beasts. When Hagoromo splits this universe's 10 tails, the Biju are more in this context a set of 9 ancient personas a killer can slip into, and their physical manifestation is basically just a big chakra ghost, kind of like we see Kurama do later in Boruto, or reminiscent to the Shinigami. This is sort of like the concept of developing a persona to bear the moral weight and blame for any atrocious actions a Jinchuriki may take, casting the Jinchuriki more realistically as a flawed or afflicted person reacting naturally to a harmful environment. And because of this nature of the tailed beast, most civilians think of them a little more so as urban legends than as actual factual things that can deal damage to them and kind of affect their lives. So among some of the really amazing things we're going to be losing out on this world, like the Naruto world's really interesting and story-rich kind of architecture that we're not going to be able to have here, we are also of course losing our access to kaiju battles. The 5 great nations eventually come into enough skirmishes to consolidate most of the world between 3 major countries, made up of the remnants of the Hidden Leaf, Stone, Cloud, Mist, and Sand villages, and more than likely including some smaller yet nonetheless noteworthy villages, which would also eventually be absorbed into the conflict via proximity, a la wave, waterfall, whirlpool, or rain. Civilization, machinery, and political/monetary ambitions begin to shift the world over into one that much more resembles our own. A world where if hypothetically powerful people were to need certain people to be past tense, they'd want it done subtly and professionally. This is Naruto in the world of assassins, Jinchuriki, Shadows in the Day. Our story begins with Ramen, and more importantly, the boy selling it, a 16-year-old orphan street kid with no family, future, or even a name to call his own. To most, he is known by the sobriquet Naruto, for the famous fish cakes found floating in his fabulous food. Though generally good-hearted, he has a pretty prickly temper, and a bad habit of picking fights with people, especially low-ranking Yakuza guys who try to use intimidation tactics to avoid paying for their food or to muscle protection money from his meager business. As a result of these scuffles, he is often forced to move around to avoid serious reprisal, having taken to selling ramen by cart and setting up in a new place in the city each day lets him fulfill his dream of affording new shoes via a concrete pair. However, no matter where he goes, one regular customer always seems to find him, a man by the name of Iruka, who sports a wicked-looking scar across the bridge of his nose, and a stylized leaf tattoo on his neck. Naruto is street smart enough to know that Iruka probably hails from the Leaf, one of the underworld's most notorious rumored assassin schools, where aspiring hitmen undergo an intensive 3-year training program to learn how to not only kill, but kill their own weaknesses. The assassin schools were not a well-kept secret, the concept that Shadows in the Day pull certain strings not being new or even unique to this world. But that doesn't matter to the blonde, since to him, Iruka is amiable, loyal, and always leaves a sizable tip. Where that money is sourced from isn't his problem. The only downside to Iruka's patronage is that when he's around, other people tend to give the card a wide berth. However, that is not the case today, as after Iruka places his standard order, a large ramen with extra Naruto maki fish cakes, another man with shaggy pale blue hair approaches. There is something shifty to this guy's eyes, but even still, Naruto doesn't discriminate when it comes to customers. Asking the man what he'd like, a predatory smile then forms on his lips, as in a mild tone he replies that he'd like Naruto's head in a box for his boss. Taking this for a bad joke, Naruto nervously chuckles and replies that though he's named after a fish cake, he doesn't really taste as good as one. But when the shaggy-haired man's demeanor doesn't change, Naruto realizes this isn't a joke. The shifty man then pulls out a switchblade, leering that it's nothing personal. His boss just thinks the kid's gonna be a problem down the line, so now he's gotta do the icky job. Mouth suddenly dry, Naruto can't think of any words to defend himself, and so suddenly starts to back away from the cart. Unfortunately, far too soon for his liking, his back butts up against a brick wall, and though he wills himself to run, his legs are frozen. Then, just before the blue-haired man can descend upon him, Iruka appears behind him, planting a blade of his own right at the attacker's throat right on his leaf tattoo. Furiously, Iruka asks the man who he calls Mizuki what he thinks he's doing, and with an equally furious whisper, Mizuki tells Iruka, who he addresses with the honorific san, clarifying that Underboss Shimura ordered this. Sighing, Iruka calls the Underboss's plan short-sighted, since he's already so close to confirming Boss' third hunch. But Mizuki shrugs that it's not for a grunt like him to question, he just whacks who the higher-ups say. Seeing that they won't be able to talk this out, Iruka barks at Naruto to run, and this at last snaps the boy out of his fear, causing him to sprint as though his life depends on it, which in this case, it does. Behind him, Naruto hears the sound of punches being thrown, and a grunt from who he can only assume is Iruka. But he doesn't dare to look back. He doesn't have time to check on the scarred man. He doesn't have time to make sure his cart hasn't been stolen. All he can do is keep his eyes forward and get away from Mizuki as fast as he can. Thankfully, having grown up on these streets, he knows their secrets better than anyone, ducking through an alleyway and scaling a chain-link fence before leaping onto a fire escape and scrambling through a gap into a boarded-up window. This joint used to be Uchiha's dry cleaning, but since it mysteriously went out of business a few years ago, it's been a good place to hide out when things get rough. Letting out a sigh that there is no way Mizuki will think to look for him here, Naruto drops to the floor, allowing himself to at last think of Iruka and what he said about Boss Third's hunch, whatever that means. He doesn't know anyone by that name, just as he'd never heard of Mizuki's boss. It's also confusing. Unfortunately, he is not given long to wonder, as a sound fills his ears that chills his soul. The rattle of someone climbing the fence and the clang of them landing on the fire escape. Peeking through his entrance, he sees Mizuki stalking towards him. Damn it, how do you know he was here? The motion of Naruto's head then catches the assassin's attention, and as he turns to look at it, the predator and prey meet eyes. With a mighty kick, Mizuki shatters the board obscuring the window and steps through, his full height towering over the prone Naruto. He then pulls a handgun from the waistband of his jeans, while fishing around for a clip of bullets in his pocket. When he finds it, he clips the magazine in and levels the pistol in Naruto's head, chuckling that it's the end of the line for the so-called demon brat. His end now in sight, Naruto doesn't feel the same fear he felt back at the cart. Instead, he feels the same anger which always courses through him when he has to feed those Yakuza assholes a knuckle sandwich. This burning rage calming him and giving him something to focus on, as he decides if he's going out, it's not gonna be like a punk. And so baring his teeth, he lunges forward, smacking the firearm so its projectile merely grazes his scalp rather than piercing and splitting it, thus resulting in a trickle of blood to flow down his face as if oil used to anoint him. And more importantly, he slams his head into the assassin's chin to discombobulate him. He then throws a punch of his own, and then another and another, feral fury bubbling up inside him, until finally, it feels as though there is too much to contain within himself, and so it leaks out, bathing his whole body in killing intent, and drowning Naruto's brain in the euphoria of violence. Though nothing physical changes, it is like Mizuki can see this, as when Naruto truly goes berserk, he screams, dropping his weapon and crawling away. Now it is his turn to come up against a brick wall, and unluckily for him, there is no kindly Iruka to save him. Letting out a bestial cry, Naruto leaps on his quarry once again, resuming his punching and kicking and even biting every square inch of him, as his mind has obviously gone into a fugue state as the violence is kicked up 11 more notches. Mizuki's unconscious body quickly turning into a tool for Naruto to use in breaking down the building, as he begins pushing, stomping, and tackling his attacker through several different rooms and floors with the speed and power he's generating, leaving many random residents of the neighborhood confused by their new windows, skylights, or trash hole, as the blonde had moved far too fast to proceed. Time becomes meaningless in this state, and though only a few seconds pass in Naruto's perception, when he calms enough to look up and find himself outside, he sees the orange light of dust coloring in the sky, while police sirens wail in the distance and grow closer. At his feet, Mizuki has been reduced to nothing but a bloody heap, lying unconscious with his teeth strewn around him, and a look around reveals a large portion of the nearby apartment complex had suffered a similar fate, as it was now leveled to the ground, while behind him, another figure watches, a mix of interest and concern on his face, Iruka. As the scarred man approaches, Naruto sees a bloody stab wound on his side, no doubt received from trying to protect him, and so goes to apologize, but Iruka stops him, speaking first and asking what happened. Naruto admits that he doesn't really know. Sometimes when he gets in scraps, his mind gets a bit hazy, but he's never fully blacked out like this before. It's almost like some demon possessed him. Face hardening, Iruka sighs that he thought that would be the case, before telling Naruto to follow it, since the police would be far less understanding to Naruto's confusion and his part in all this. Sick of being confused, Naruto refuses, saying he's not going anywhere until Iruka starts explaining himself. With a tired look, the man discourages this as stupid, before scooping Naruto up and zipping to the rooftops in a flicker of superhuman speed. Once safely from the now crime scene, Naruto reiterates his demand, now further motivated to know exactly how all these crazy things were happening. Iruka rolls his eyes, explaining that what Naruto just did was tap into the 9th demon persona, a state of mind capable of granting improved strength, but at the cost of a feral temperament. His boss, Boss Third, has long suspected Naruto might be capable of this, since his mother, an assassin known as Red Hot Kushina, was the last known master of this form. That's why he's had him keep an eye on Naruto. This all makes the boy's head spin, as it sounds like some wacky plot of a manga. But for the moment, he suppresses that, focusing instead on the more important question, where Iruka is taking him. Smiling, the brown-haired assassin responds that he's taking him to the Leaf. They've got undeniable proof that he's got that killer instinct, so it's high time he be taught how to use it properly. Naruto gawks at the idea of entering the criminal underworld, only to be sent to some snooty school, much less one where everyone is training to learn to better and more efficiently take lives. Some hesitance being born from the idea that there may also be more like Mizuki, who work for whomever this person who views him as a danger is. However, Iruka, having firmly cemented himself as an ally, casually places a hand atop the blonde's head, rubbing it soothingly and expressing to him that things would all turn out alright. Since an even larger portion of Boss Third's reasoning for ordering Naruto's retrieval finally is so he may find a quality of life not so unfit for even the city's most unwanted strays, who'd commonly be fed or sheltered by strangers. This comparison makes Naruto's jaw set, and as he introspectively considers what he truly wants and whether it can be attained on this new path, he questions whether he'll really have to kill people someday. Iruka can only offer a small smile and a curt nod in the affirmative, concretely setting the expectations of this new arrangement. So with a sigh, Naruto rises and states he'll do it, but only for the sake of living to spite those who want him dead. Looking to Iruka, he asks where they start. With a smile, Iruka claims at the beginning, as he suddenly chops Naruto across the neck to knock him unconscious, scooping him back up and chuckling that orientation was always his favorite part of school. But that, friends, is where we'll be leaving this tale as well as this mini-series off seemingly forever. Hey guys, before we sign out, I do want to give a very special shout out to Pickle Dill, who helped me get the actual kind of thoughts and bullet points for this script actually expanded out into an actual story. And I also want to apologize because I will admit I probably bit off a little more than I could chew with this mini-series. The big thing is that it was always going to be just really disappointing to start these really interesting stories and then leave them off. And I also think I got a lot of this kind of itch out of my system with the second one when I sat there the entire time, and I wholeheartedly brag the third one would be the best. As it stands, I would probably rank them as Samurai, Assassin, and then Magic. And that's mostly because the Magic one was so much setup more so than me actually getting to sit down and tell a story. My biggest issue with this one really comes down to the fact that it just feels a little too generic to me. Like if I read this in an actual manga, I don't think I would be as hooked as I would want to be. But, you know, if I actually spent the time that would be taken for the first chapter of a manga, 50 pages or 60 pages, this part would have been way longer. It would have covered a lot more. It would have showed a lot more of the actual, the training Naruto's about to go into. You set up the school system and stuff like that. So I do cut it off right before it gets to the most interesting part. I do recognize that. And because of that, I am probably a little more open to continuing any of my runs of these, probably in some podcast forms, not really in full story, because I do think these are still not necessarily suited for full stories, at least for me. But I'm a little more open to doing more with these than I was when I first started. Something else is I've actually already had a few of you reach out to me to let me know, hey, you do want to give your own takes on these, or you do want to kind of start from where I started. So one thing I'm going to try and do, and I do want you guys to kind of stay on me and remind me to do this, is I want to pin a comment that'll just kind of be my notes of where I would go from where I left off with the first 3 parts, or if you didn't want to use those versions, what I would consider when writing my own version of this kind of same prompt. Other than that, I am going to go ahead and just let this series be done, because it does feel like a bit of a trap to get stuck in a rut of thinking like, oh, these all have to be perfect, especially when right now they're not that popular with you guys. I think they'll probably be a little better received when they're all kind of compiled together, which is also why I'm going to be editing this one podcast style. That plus the fact that it's kind of New Year's and I'm still trying to relax a little bit and I'm still a little sick. So please let me know what you thought of this last part as well as the miniseries as a whole. Look out for those notes. I'm going to try and get those to you guys as well. And last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and shout out our patrons and get on out of here.